back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back with you for another talk. Yet again, Nebojša Malić. Nebojša, the Nebulator. How you doing? Welcome
doing all
back.
Right. A little warm today.
It's it's been a while. I was expecting you to come on with a suit as always, and I suited up at least above the waist for this talk. But you surprised me in your casual American tee.
Well, it's July. It's a little warm. You know, we're trying to save energy. BlackRock said global warming is a danger, so we're trying to obey our corporate masters. You know how it goes.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to do what the system tells you, right? For people who are new here, hi, welcome, subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. And this is a comedy show. Nothing here is serious. And we have a tradition going of me interrupting the guests. So if you notice me interrupting the guests, that's just what the people here ask for. Nebojša, there's a lot to talk about. We've had the Wagner Circus, also known as the Wagner coup. It's been almost a month now. What's your take on what happened?
That nobody really knows what happened. I mean, on the surface of it, it was a mutiny of a private military company that was instrumental in taking a couple of key fortifications on the Donbass front. And all of a sudden, for no reason at all, they just rebelled. And the data about the ammunition that they turned over to the Russian military later shows that they didn't have an ammunition shortage.
Mm-hmm.
The ostensible attack on the Wagner camp that Prigozhin quoted as the sort of a pretext for launching his mutiny was so obviously staged it couldn't pass muster. And all of a sudden, these guys are ending up in Belarus, and they're not being criminally prosecuted, even though some Russian servicemen died. And Putin is telling his trusted reporters that, oh, there was never such a thing as Wagner. It doesn't exist in Russian law.
Yeah, that was 2 days ago, 3 days ago, something like that. The news came out that Putin was like, there is no Wagner. You're imagining it.
There's no such thing as Wagner. It's simply not a legal category. Well, okay, it's not a legal category, but who were these people?
Well, it's somewhere in the Ministry of Defense paperwork, probably. But yeah, it's funny, just the memes that have spawned. This is, by the way, footage from History Legends, who's one of the only YouTubers / analysts / whatever you want to call these people, who actually admits to the fact that, like you said, we don't know basically what happened and what is happening. What do you make of the rumor that there's a force building up that's going to strike from the north, from Belarus?
It's an interesting rumor. I love History Legends. His videos are hilarious and very informative. But yes, he says we just don't know. And anybody who pretends to know is basically full of it. There's been a lot of speculation, informed or otherwise. I honestly don't know what they're doing up there, and neither does the government in Kiev, which I think was, I'll venture a guess that was the point of the whole exercise.
About a week or 2 weeks after it happened, this came out, which is Prigozhin in various disguises, because these wigs and random passports were found in his house. And here we have Prigozhin as all kinds of random people, and people still believe to think that he went crazy, because today's news is this: Yevgeny Prigozhin explanation for his violent mutiny is I went crazy. This is the Daily Beast. In all fairness, Your Honor, my client was in goblin mode is the rest of this, but we can't see it because it's cropped off by the screen. But the point is, this is from Tim Kirby, Russia Hardcore. He posted this. So, he was just hangry. And then he had a sandwich.
Well, I mean, as the commercial says, when you're hangry, you're not yourself. And I wonder which of the personas in that photo he was channeling at the time. Maybe General Aladdin from The Dictator. That seems to be
Right? Basically.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, it's an excellent movie. Yeah. And speaking of movies, the Serbian meme page that I follow and warmly suggest to any Serbian to follow, Nacionalno meme koordinaciono telo, has also joined the bandwagon of memeing about the Wagner coup, and their memes are right on point. So the best film production of 2023 goes to the Wagner coup. Getting onto some more sober and serious subjects. There was a bombing again of the Kerch Bridge, also known as the Crimean Bridge, or Putin's favorite bridge, or Putin's pride and joy, or whatever label you want to put to it. What's your take on the terrorist attack and the death of 2 innocent civilians plus the Ukrainian? I had actually some pictures of Ukrainian posts of man, they're sick, these people. Some posts of food in the shape of the parents in their last photo with the kid. What's your take?
I mean, I've seen Ukrainian cake in the shape of Russian babies that's supposed to be cut with knives and things like that, and Cafe Hitler, stuff like that. That's just been routine for the past almost 10 years, and nobody seems to bat an eye, and nobody in the West anyway, because that's Ukraine they want and need as an enemy to Russia. They're perfect proxy. And again, nobody seems to be condemning. Nobody in the Western mainstream, not that I expected anybody to be, is condemning this kind of behavior. You see plenty of decent independent journalists and other public personalities who are like, "This is appalling. Why are you doing this? This is inhumane." And then, of course, it's hardening the Russians' resolve, as we can see by what's happening with the ports, former ports, along the Black Sea coast. But it's just abominable, because it's one of those. It brings me back to the Yugoslavia issue. People why do the Croats or the Bosniaks or the Albanians hate Serbs so much? Oh, well, it's because the Serbs were historically oppressing them. You mean the questionable period of history that you claim something happened that followed, centuries or decades of atrocities for which you have no explanation? I dare anybody to show me Serbs oppressing anybody in Bosnia in 1914. It didn't happen. It was 40 years of Austrian occupation following 400 years of Ottoman occupation. So yeah, find me the Serbs there. There weren't any. It's Serb oppressors, I mean. And so this whole thing in Ukraine is like, oh, well, they're just reacting to, Putin's brutal, unprovoked, full-scale, whatever meme of the day aggression. I'm sorry, but no, that's BS. These sentiments were there 10 years ago, completely unprovoked, literally, in this case, completely unprovoked. And they're just constantly manifesting because, I'm sorry, but if your culture celebrates the orphaning of a 14-year-old girl, you're the baddies.
Did you watch that NAFO summit before the NATO summit in Vilnius? They had a shark.
I'm still my eyes from it.
They had a shark on stage celebrating the death of that tourist in Egypt. You know that a shark ate a Russian tourist?
Yeah. I saw that.
So I really don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say about these people. Go ahead, please. This is a comedy show.
It's that NAFO summit, the collection of freaks and degenerates, was actually a wake-up call for every Russian liberal who thought that, they're going to be accepted and loved by the West if they spit on their country and their
You think any Russian liberal even noticed that thing happening? I think the Russian liberals are too busy doing other things.
They are, but they noticed. I actually know for a fact that one of Navalny's aides was complaining about this kind of dehumanization. I don't think she changed her mind. I think she's a little too far gone for that. But a lot of people who haven't gone quite that far were like, wait a second, they're celebrating the death of a Russian who was, according to multiple accounts actually pro-Ukrainian and left because he supported Ukraine and opposed the military operation. And they're still celebrating it because they hate all Russians? Oh, and you can just see the sort of light going on above their heads.
And the Serbs are like, oh, first time?
Yeah, first time.
I don't know. The only thing that I saw come out of the Vilnius summit, other than, the declaration of that 12 or 15 or 17 point NATO statement about what's wrong with the assumptions that the world has about what NATO's doing, it is a resurgence of bots. On Telegram, a lot of channel admins have shared their troubles with me so far, so much so that I even went as far as to make this meme. The NAFO troll army is real, and there's a lot of impersonators as well. It's unbelievable what goes on behind the scenes.
Well, they can't win a real war, so they're resorting to trying to win the imaginary one. If they poison the discourse online, they might fool some people into believing that an alternate reality exists, which has been the strategy from day one, from the ghosts of Kiev to Snake Island. I've actually noticed a decrease in NAFO activity on Twitter. I guess it must be Elon's new algorithm, but they seem to have upped their trolling on Telegram, which Durov doesn't really administer with an iron fist, and he shouldn't. But it's up to group admins to police their chats, and it's becoming more and more of a chore, I think.
It's not just about chats. It's about impersonators, pretending to be the admins of accounts. But if you guys who are watching this, and girls, because there is 12 to 17% women who actually watch this channel, which is unbelievable. Check out the link to the Telegram. Lots of things happen in Telegram that don't happen in the YouTube comments. This was sent in by a subscriber, Roland Madness. He's a long-time subscriber. He made this
accurate.
Yeah, me in the YouTube comments is not me on Telegram. So come see the real me on Telegram. But yeah, I wanted to bring up Bosnia, or Republika Srpska, or its basically separation, because that is where you're from originally. And you could speak to it in a lot more detail than I can. What do you make of Dodik's moves? What do you make of the de facto basically outing of the High Commissioner, or whatever his term is, the occupier force representative, who doesn't have any dictate? And what do you make of the taking down of that sign? The city limits sign.
So the city limits thing was just an act of state-sanctioned vandalism. It was abominable. A simple sign apparently hurt the Bosnian Muslim politicians so much because it spoke the truth about how Serbs are a statistical rounding error in present-day Sarajevo, that they sent thugs to take it down, and apparently the Republika Srpska set up a new one already. So it's one of those, why are you bothered by a sign? It's always the truth that provokes.
The sign said "Welcome to East Sarajevo," if I recall, and then it said "a city of all the people that were forced out of Sarajevo," something along those lines.
150,000 Serbs who had to leave. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. I'm technically one of them, but I didn't leave during the March '96 exodus. I left a little before, and I didn't plan to leave for good, but it ended up happening that way.
Yeah.
To say that I left entirely of my own volition is not accurate. Let's put it that way. Euphemistically. But as for the other stuff, I mean, trying to get into the details of what Bosnian politics and law involve is going to bore people to tears, and this is a comedy show. So all I'm going to say is that crux of this current conflict is the fact that the Constitutional Court, which is not actually in the Constitution because they never passed a law about it, has recently adopted a rule by itself that it can work without any Serb judges, which is
Which
obviously a
is
problem. Well, it's obviously, I mean, they were already doing the whole, we have more votes than you think because all of Bosnia on every other level is set up that,
doesn't this go back to like Dayton Accords and like,
no.
Isn't it supposed? No, I mean, isn't it supposed to like have Serbian representation because of like ethnic Serb representation because of like back to like the Dayton Accords?
Well, every instance of government,
yeah,
right? Everything in the Constitution says there has to be equal representation, equity, so to speak. But this court was set up afterwards, and there is no law. There's no law regulating it. And so they've been writing their own rules. Hey, rules-based world order, that's how it works. And they just rewrote the rules to allow for there not being any Serb representatives. Mm-hmm. So how are your decisions legitimate when you have essentially 3 foreign judges and 2 Muslim judges?
What do you mean foreign judges? Like, explain for the viewers.
Right. Because Bosnia is so sovereign and independent and totally free and a country, proper country. That
European values and democracy.
Yeah. That the European Court of Human Rights appoints 3 of the judges onto the 7-judge panel, because it's supposed to be 2 judges each of the Muslim Serbs and Croats, and then these 3 foreigners. That's not 7, that's 9. I'm sorry, I can't count. And these 3 judges basically, and the Muslims end up making all of the decisions by voting against either the Serbs or the Croats, who can't do anything about it because the court was not properly set up. It's not in the Dayton Accords. And so, and the parliaments or any of the parliaments didn't ratify it. I think it was conjured by one of the previous viceroys, and that's the term I use for the so-called high representative, because they're neither high nor do they represent anybody. Especially this new guy who's a failed German agriculture minister, and he was basically appointed by the U.S. and the EU 2 years ago, and it was never ratified by the UN. Mm-hmm. And the Serb member of the presidency, I actually posted about this on my Telegram. She sent to the General Secretary of the UN this most. I think this is the most delightfully passive-aggressive letter that I've ever seen in the annals of diplomacy. She basically said, "Could you please help us find this document? We can't seem to find it anywhere. That confirms the appointment of Mr. Christian Schmidt to be the High Representative. All we can find is these minutes of a Security Council meeting that say that his appointment wasn't actually approved because only 2 people voted in favor of it, and everybody else was either opposed or didn't vote. Or that doesn't seem right." And of course, there hasn't been any answer to the letter because there is no such document. The man literally sits there without being properly appointed, and he claims to be imposing laws and rules and changing the Constitution and altering the bargain. Pray I don't alter it further, based on these so-called bond powers that were arrogated to them by this ad hoc council of countries in 1997. But there's no document. Like, those powers are never listed. There's no It's one of those, in a civilization that supposedly runs on rules and written constitutions and documents and legal deeds. This man is not. There's no document about his appointment. He literally doesn't exist legally, as Putin would put it. There is no document whatsoever listing any of these bond powers or explaining where they come from or who brought them into being. They were just conjured out of thin air, and everybody's supposed to obey them because the empire says so. And now some people are asking questions. Well, where's it written? Is there a law? Where does it say? And they're being told to shut up and submit, and they're refusing to shut up. And now the empire that's used to being obeyed instinctively has a problem because it actually has to prove its claim to power, and it can't.
Um, the empire that's used to being obeyed. What an interesting way to put it. I prefer Putin's empire of lies, honestly, but I want to circle back to the Kerch Bridge terrorist attack and this trend of, like, what can I say? Your little quote here sums it up pretty well. Um, Russia has attacked Odessa severely since then. What do you think is going to be the real repercussions of this? And do you see severe escalation? Because there's rumors of, like, all these generals that have been laid off and disappeared and killed. There's a rumor that there's, like, basically another army that's being built in the forests of Belarus and Russia that's going to come in from the north.
Again, it's a great rumor, as these things go. I don't want to dabble in strategy where I don't have enough information, but I will point out one thing: that in this day and age, where you have intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance that can, basically catch a mouse crossing the battlefield, you can't necessarily hide troop movements or deployments. You can, however, mask them. And deception becomes infinitely more valuable in these circumstances. Now, of course, Ukraine doesn't have much in the way of ISR anymore, but the entire Western military alliance that backs it and then pretends it's not involved does. And you have an incredible amount of Western aerial activity on the borders and in the Black Sea, preceding the attack on the bridge, following the attack.
I don't call it surveillance anymore. I call it, like, support, because it's not surveillance.
Yeah, I mean, they're feeding them real-time intelligence. If this is not getting involved in the war, I don't know what is. But you also have medical evacuation flights, because apparently something was recently hit that required medical evacuations. You have there's a whole lot of activity going on that is suggesting something big is happening, both on the front lines and in the strategic rear. Now, of course, cynics might say, well, if the Russians are blowing up the airports and the infrastructure now, what was stopping them, for the past 18 months? And there's alternating explanation for this. One is laziness and incompetence, and the other one is basic decency. Pick whichever one you want to run with. I'm not going to prejudice anything, but what strikes me as my impression from what the Russian military is doing is that they're actually moving very deliberately. I didn't post. I very specifically said, there's nothing to say here because there's no point in words anymore. Words sort of. The pen is mightier than the sword until the shooting starts, until things go kinetic. At which point it's the bullets that do the talking, it's the missiles that do the talking, and they're the ones that are going to determine the situation at the end of the day. And once the peace treaty is signed, then you get the wordsmiths, going in again, retconning and rationalizing things and rewriting history to suit their own ends, as Winston Churchill famously did. But we're sort of in that position now, in that stage now, where it's the bullets and the missiles doing the talking. So, anything I have to say about this matter is kind of irrelevant when compared to what's actually happening on the ground. But again,
considering we haven't spoken since the counteroffensive began, I believe, what's your take on the super duper ultra spring, summer, winter, future last year offensive?
So a quote from the Duke of Wellington comes to mind.
Duke of Wellington.
They came in the same old way and we beat them in the same old way, is what he allegedly said at Waterloo, or variations thereof. He was referring to the French column formation that sort of, charged his fortified position and got shot to pieces. And that's what we've been seeing for the past 6 weeks. You have Ukrainians charging Russian fortified positions, or screening positions even, and getting shot to pieces, losing all of this precious Western armor. There's no air support because they don't have any left. There's no air defense because it's been destroyed. There's some radars and counter jamming, but that's nowhere near enough to accomplish anything. And they've literally switched from sending in tanks that they don't have as many anymore to sending in infantry and human wave assaults, or meat assaults as they call them, to try to capture these positions, because they figure, well, the Russians aren't going to waste artillery on a platoon of men. Well, guess what? They are. And they're going to use mines, and they're going to use flamethrowers, and they're going to use tanks.
Speaking of artillery, what do you make of the cluster munitions that are being sent? Keeping in mind, cluster munitions in Yugoslavia and all that good stuff.
Well, first of all, it's an act of desperation. I mean,
and did you hear? What's his name? That idiot U.S. senator. Sorry, keep going. I'll find it.
I know who you mean. I'm not going to say what I mean here because that's going to get us both censored. But,
okay. But it's a comedy show.
Well, exactly. I mean, and he's sort of a walking joke, except that he's a walking joke that ends up killing, millions of people around the world with his warmongering insanity. I mean, this is the man who famously argued for immigration by saying that South Carolina needs workers in its agriculture and hospitality industry. Let that stew for a moment and think about who else South Carolina imported for agriculture and hospitality several centuries ago, and how that's worked out. I'm just going to leave that there. That's the level of wisdom coming from this man. Enough said.
Yeah. So cluster munitions.
They're a war crime. I mean, people can plead technicalities. Oh, well, neither the U.S. nor Russia nor Ukraine have signed a convention. Right, but 150 countries did. Most of NATO has banned it. And the fact that the U.S. supplied these munitions to Ukraine through the NATO support program literally means that they've made every single one of their NATO allies that signed the convention
Lindsey Graham. I found his name. Lindsey Graham on cluster munitions. People look it up. It's hilarious. It's a good joke. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, it's one of those, but it's literally one of those, if whether something is good or bad depends on who does it to whom type of thing. Like Russell Brand had a great clip saying, cluster bombs are either good or bad. They can't be good or bad based on who they kill. And I'm 100% agree with him. He's got a point there. If they kill Russians, they're great. If they kill Ukrainians or anybody else, they're terrible. Well, no, that's not how this works. It may be how it works in Lindsey Graham's head, but it's not how it works anywhere else. But I think using cluster, I mean, aside from being, making your allies into criminals by making them accomplices in your breach of the convention, they're also an act of desperation, because cluster bombs are not something you employ against fortified positions. They were designed to interfere with open ground attack by an enemy army. So sending them to Ukraine, and you have multiple U.S. officials, including Joe Biden himself, saying, "Oh, well, we're out of conventional ammo, so this is what we have to send." Because we've got nothing else to send. Whether that's true or not, sending them to if it's not true, if they're sending them to Ukraine because they still have other ammunition, but they're sending them for a particular reason, that would suggest that they're actually afraid that the Russian military is going to attack in these mass pincer movements and carve up the Ukrainians to bits even more. So, which is it? Is the U.S. running out of ammunition and sending these as an act of desperation? Or is it anticipating a Russian assault that the Ukrainians need to defend from. But why are they doing that if the Ukrainians are supposedly winning every day and they're totally winning this war? And it's just a matter of time. But it's going slower than usual. But rest assured that everything is fine, and just shut up, pay your taxes, and support Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. I mean, none of this makes sense.
It just depends on which audio clips you get to hear. But if you listen to all of them, then yeah, it doesn't make sense. But if you hear the right ones, then yeah, the Ukrainians are winning, man.
And I'm sorry, but anybody who honestly believes that is deliberately misinformed.
Anybody with an IQ higher than their shoe size is deliberately misinformed. The rest are innocent victims of the propaganda machine, I believe, more than anything. There is a lot of that, unfortunately, in the times we're living in.
Just to clarify your point, you're talking European shoe sizes, because if we're talking American shoe sizes, then these people would be completely non-functional.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. U.S. shoe sizes are like in 10s and 12s, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. Double digit, yeah.
Oh, that map.
I spent a bit of time. They had a map that had like this part as Russia, and then I fixed it a bit. I'm pretty sure that like this needs to be resolved as well. For those that don't know, Working Brother is also on Instagram, as you can see here. I'm also on the Twitter. Ever since Musk took it over, I figured I'd give it a try. Nebojša is on there too. I'll leave a link to his Telegram and his everything else. Nebojša, the Nebulator. Anything else you'd like to draw attention to before we bring this talk to a close?
Sure. Just sort of general impression of the world today is that you've got all these eyes pointed to Ukraine, and everything is focusing on the battlefield. I'll just ask the people who are not willing to be willingly misinformed, who are watching this channel and paying attention to the world around them, to sort of zoom out and take a look at the bigger picture. What's happening with Africa, what's happening with South America, what's happening with China specifically, and the degree to which Europe is becoming irrelevant, whether people like it or not, and to which the U.S. will is no longer able to be imposed on the world, and sort of get the impression of how this is trending and where this is going towards. And, you have your daily details, and then you have your big picture, and you see the direction of where the things are going, and I guess plan accordingly.
So, are we in World War III, or are we not in World War III yet?
I would say we are in a soft World War III, because a hard World War III would involve nuclear weapons, and nobody really wants that, even the crazy people.
Yeah, even Erdogan said that, I think, recently, officially. He was like, nope, thanks.
So everybody's trying to push the envelope as far as it will go without having this go nuclear hot. And I think
nuclear. Without having it go nuclear.
I will never underestimate the stupidity of people, but in this particular instance, it's people are still being wise enough to realize that once the nukes start flying, we're all dead.
Excellent. Nebojša, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone, like, share, subscribe, check out all the links. If you like what I do, like all 5 of the Patreons, go check out the Patreon. Cheaper than a coffee a month. See you later, everyone.